My husband's sister-like best friend was going through a tough divorce, so I agreed to let her move in with us. I tried to be supportive, I really did. But I came home from work one day to find my husband moving his things out of our bedroom and into hers. He told me she needed him to hold her at night to stop her panic attacks. They were both smiling, expecting me to agree. They forgot one tiny detail. The house was in my name. My marriage, a union I had entered into 4 years ago with a heart full of hope, was built on a foundation that had one persistent hairline crack. For 7 years, 3 of them dating and 4 of them as husband and wife, our relationship had been a portrait of normalcy, colored with laughter, shared dreams, and mutual respect. But always, in the corner of that portrait, there was a shadow, a third person whose presence was a constant, low hum of discord beneath the surface of our life. That shadow had a name, Fiona. My husband referred to her as his best friend, his sister, a bond forged in the crucible of a shared childhood. They were neighbors, inseparable from the moment they could toddle across the lawn to each other's houses. Their history was a tapestry they never tired of unfurling for me, a chronicle of shared sandboxes, scraped knees, and teenage secrets. They'd navigated the same daycare, the same schools from kindergarten through 12th grade, and had even attended the same university, albeit in different faculties. Their paths only diverged when the practicalities of careers finally pulled them into separate orbits. It was in that space, that brief Fiona-less interlude, that I met my husband. I was, as Fiona so generously informed me during one of our first, excruciating meetings, the third woman in his life. First his mom, then me, then you, she'd said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. The joke, if it was one, landed with the thud of a thinly veiled assertion of her own permanent, unassailable position in his hierarchy. From the very beginning, I felt less like a partner and more like a contestant in a game I hadn't agreed to play. My intuition screamed that she saw me as a rival, a temporary usurper to her throne. Our introduction was a masterclass in her particular brand of subtle hostility. My husband had presented me with a proud smile. "This is Fiona, my oldest friend." I extended a hand, my own smile genuine, ready to embrace this person who meant so much to him. But Fiona's eyes swept over me, a critical inventory from head to toe. "Wow, a full face of makeup," she'd remarked, her tone sweet as poison. "You really don't have to try so hard to impress me." The comment, delivered with a disarming smile, was the opening salvo in a long and tiresome war of attrition. Every encounter was peppered with these little digs, these carefully crafted potshots disguised as friendly banter. My clothes were interesting, my perfume was a little strong, my opinions were cute. She was the queen of the backhanded compliment, each one a tiny, sharp needle designed to prick at my self-esteem. The most egregious offense came one evening at a dinner party, where, in front of a table of our friends, she announced with a theatrical sigh that my husband had always had a weakness for dumb blondes. "I am, and have always been, blonde." The table fell silent, and I felt the hot flush of humiliation creep up my neck. I pleaded with my husband on numerous occasions to see what I saw. I tried to explain that Fiona's bluntness was just a convenient excuse for cruelty, but he would invariably brush my concerns aside. "That's just Fiona," he'd say with an indulgent chuckle. "She's an acquired taste. She doesn't mince words, and a lot of women find that intimidating." The implication was always clear. I was one of those insecure, overly sensitive women, unable to handle a strong personality like Fiona's. He would build her up by tearing others, specifically me, down. It should have been a red flag the size of a billboard, a blaring siren warning me of the emotional triangulation to come. But I loved him. Away from her, he was everything I had ever wanted in a partner: intelligent, charismatic, and deeply affectionate. He had a way of making me feel cherished and seen, and in those moments, the Fiona problem seemed like a small, manageable tax on an otherwise perfect life. I made a conscious decision to tolerate her, to build a fortress around my own confidence, and refuse to let her barbs find their mark. For a while it worked. A fragile peace settled when Fiona met Eddie on a dating app. The change in her was immediate. She was consumed by this new romance, her focus shifting from policing my life to planning her own. Within a year, they were engaged, and the constant low-level harassment I had endured finally ceased. She was, for all intents and purposes, happy, and her happiness afforded me a blessed respite. Her whirlwind romance with Eddie still felt alarmingly fast to me. A year seemed like a shockingly short time to commit to a lifetime with someone, especially since they had only recently moved in together. But it wasn't my place to say anything. Fiona and I were not friends, and any unsolicited advice from me would have been received as an attack. I did voice my concerns to my husband, hoping he might gently suggest they pump the brakes, but he was swept up in the romance of it all. "Isn't it great?" he'd beamed. "We're both engaged at the same time. We could have a joint wedding." I shut that particular fantasy down with swift and decisive force, explaining that my vision for our wedding day did not align with Fiona's, a polite understatement for, I'd rather elope to a remote island than share my wedding day with that woman. Thankfully, she didn't push the issue. She and Eddie were married in a lavish ceremony a month after our own, and for a few blissful years, our lives settled into a peaceful, parallel rhythm. The storm, however, was merely gathering strength just over the horizon. 5 months ago, it broke. Fiona, in a tearful confession to my husband, revealed that she and Eddie had been trying to conceive for months, without success. A battery of medical tests followed, culminating in a devastating diagnosis. Fiona was infertile. The news was a wrecking ball to her marriage. Eddie, it turned out, was not the devoted partner he had appeared to be. He filed for divorce, his reasoning both brutal and simple. He could not, and would not, stay with a woman who couldn't give him biological children. The cruelty of it was breathtaking, and for the first time in our long and fraught history, I felt a genuine pang of sympathy for Fiona. Her pain was palpable, and she began to gravitate towards our home, seeking solace in my husband's unwavering friendship. She started visiting constantly, her presence a constant shroud of grief in our home. I tolerated it, I truly did. How could I not? The woman was broken. Each visit was a deluge of tears, a fresh wave of despair, and my husband would spend hours consoling her, his arm a steady presence around her shaking shoulders. It was impossible to be annoyed with someone in such obvious, profound pain. The divorce proceedings were a fresh hell for her, forcing her to face the man who had discarded her so callously. She began to spiral, her grief curdling into a deep, frightening depression. It was then that my husband came to me with a request that would prove to be a catastrophic mistake. He asked if Fiona could move in with us, just for a little while. "She says being around us is the only thing that makes her feel sane," he'd pleaded, his eyes full of concern for his friend. My heart, softened by her tragedy, overruled my head. I agreed. The regret was instantaneous. From the moment her suitcases crossed the threshold of my front door, our home ceased to be my own. Fiona, cloaked in the unassailable armor of her depression, became a tyrant. Nothing I did was right. My cooking was bland. The decor of our house was tacky. My television shows were mindless. Every aspect of our shared life was subjected to her withering critique, and my husband, desperate to soothe her fragile state, capitulated to her every whim. We ate what she wanted to eat, watched what she wanted to watch, and listened to her endless litany of complaints in silence. "She needs this right now," he would whisper to me late at night, a mantra that was beginning to wear thin. I told him repeatedly that she needed to leave, that her parents' home was a perfectly viable option, but he was terrified. He was convinced that if we asked her to leave, she would do something drastic, something irreversible. The unspoken threat of self-harm became a cage, trapping all three of us in a toxic, unbearable dynamic. I wouldn't have that on my conscience, so I bit my tongue and endured. But 2 days ago, they crossed a line so egregious, so far beyond the pale of acceptable behavior, that my silence finally shattered. I came home from work, weary and ready for the sanctuary of my own space, to a scene of quiet, methodical chaos. My husband, who had apparently come home early, was in the process of moving his belongings out of our shared bedroom. His clothes, his books, his side of our life were being transferred, piece by piece, into the guest room, Fiona's room. She was there, helping him, a strange, triumphant little smile playing on her lips. For the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely happy. I stood in the hallway, a cold knot of disbelief tightening in my stomach. "What is going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I requested to speak with him privately, but he waved a dismissive hand. "It's fine. You can say whatever you need to in front of Fiona. We don't have secrets." I looked from his smiling face to hers and asked the question that was screaming in my mind. "Why are you moving your things into the guest room?" He answered with a casualness that was nothing short of breathtaking. "Oh, I'm going to be sleeping in here with Fiona for a while." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for the indication that this was some kind of sick, twisted joke. It never came. Why? I finally managed to choke out. His explanation was delivered, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. Fiona, he explained, had been suffering from debilitating panic attacks. She would wake up in the middle of the night, gasping for air, convinced her world was ending. She needed someone with her, someone to hold her and comfort her until the terror subsided. "You can't be serious," I said, the words catching in my throat. "You cannot possibly expect me to be okay with my husband sharing a bed with another woman." He deployed the excuse that had been his shield for years, the one that was supposed to negate all my feelings, all my boundaries. "She's like a sister to me," he said, his smile unwavering. "You have absolutely nothing to worry about." They both stood there, beaming at me, a united front of delusion, as if their shared smiles were a magic wand that could transform this grotesque violation into a noble, selfless act. The rage that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks, for years, finally erupted. It was a clean, white-hot fury that burned away all the hurt and confusion, leaving behind a diamond-hard certainty. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to physically wipe those smug expressions off their faces. But instead, a chilling calm descended over me. I smiled back at them, a wide, serene smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You know what?" I said, my voice sweet as saccharin. "I understand. I completely understand. You do what you need to do to take care of her." My husband's face relaxed into a look of smug relief. "I knew you'd get it," he said, turning back to arranging his clothes in the guest room closet. I turned and walked back to my bedroom. I went straight to the closet, to the small safe hidden in the back, where I kept my important documents. I pulled out the deed to the house. A wedding gift from my father, a gesture of his love, and a guarantee of my security. It had only ever been in my name. The house, this sanctuary they were so casually desecrating, was legally, unequivocally mine. I walked back to the guest room, the document a cool, heavy weight in my hand. "Are you two all settled in?" I asked, my voice still light, still airy. They nodded, still smiling. "Great," I said, my own smile finally reaching my eyes. "Then you can start packing again. Because the two of you are about to be homeless. And you can play your happy, supportive, sister-brother game on the street." My husband's face contorted in confusion, a look that slowly morphed into dawning horror as I held up the deed. "This house," I stated, my voice ringing with a newfound power, "is mine. And I am no longer willing to tolerate either of you living under my roof and disrespecting me and my marriage." He tried to laugh it off, a desperate, sputtering sound. "You're being ridiculous. You're not serious." "Oh, I am," I assured him. "I am actively in the process of kicking you out. I'm sick of you, and I'm even sicker of your blubbering, manipulative, so-called sister." At the mention of her name, Fiona's face crumpled, and the waterworks started anew. My husband immediately leaped to her defense, his voice rising in anger. "You've always been jealous of her. You're just too insecure to handle our friendship." "You're damn right I'm insecure," I shot back. But my insecurity didn't materialize out of thin air. It was manufactured by the two of you and your bizarre, codependent relationship. If you can't live without each other, then do the world a favor and just be with each other instead of dragging innocent people into your psychodrama. The fight that ensued was ugly, a torrent of accusations and recriminations that had been dammed up for years. But in the end, there was no arguing with the document in my hand. They left, my husband muttering about how insulted he was, how he'd been nothing but loyal, and Fiona sobbing about how evil and cruel I was. I didn't say another word. I just stood in the doorway and watched them go, the silence they left behind the sweetest sound I had ever heard. I had foolishly believed that evicting them from my house would be the end of the drama. I was wrong. It was merely the beginning of a new chapter. Within hours of their departure, my phone began to buzz with a relentless stream of messages. It was a coordinated assault, a campaign of guilt and manipulation orchestrated by my husband. Friends we shared, people who had never before commented on our relationship, were suddenly experts on my marriage. The messages all carried the same tune. I was overreacting, I was making a big deal out of nothing. Fiona was having panic attacks, a serious medical issue, and my husband was just being a good, supportive friend. How could I be so selfish as to make her crisis all about my own insecurities? The wording was so similar from message to message that it was laughably obvious he had fed them a script. When I ignored the friends, he escalated, sicking his entire family on me. Aunts, uncles, cousins, his parents. All of them came at me with the same tired arguments. I was heartless, horrible, a terrible wife who didn't deserve a man as compassionate as their son. They had always known I wasn't good enough for him, they said, and my actions now were just proof. The sheer volume of the harassment was overwhelming. For my own sanity, I started blocking numbers, erecting a digital fortress against their onslaught. Then, a message came through from an unknown number. It was him. He wrote, still willing to take me back, provided I apologized. He reiterated his tired defense. Fiona was the sister he never had. His love for her was deep, yes, but purely platonic. The love he had for me was sacred, romantic, a completely different category. He claimed the thought of a life without me was devastating, that he had made a mistake in how he handled the situation, but that my reaction had been disproportionately harsh. He urged me to think with a cooler head, to consider the consequences of my actions before I made a mistake I would regret for the rest of my life. He was ready to forgive me, he said, if I was ready to forgive him. The audacity of it, the sheer, unmitigated gall of his gaslighting, left me breathless. He was offering a reconciliation based on a foundation of mutual apologies, as if my reaction to him moving into another woman's bed was somehow equivalent to his decision to do so. The message did throw me off, but not in the way he intended. It solidified my resolve. I had been a fool, blinded by a love that had demanded I shrink myself, my feelings, my own intuition, to make room for his inappropriate friendship. I sought counsel from my parents, who were horrified by his behavior and fully supported my decision to file for divorce. There was no coming back from this. He would never choose me over her. I didn't respond to his text. I didn't know where he and Fiona had gone, and I found I didn't care. The less I knew, the better. My future was about moving forward, not looking back. I deserved to be someone's first choice, not a begrudging third. I filed the divorce papers. A week after he was served, he appeared on my doorstep. He claimed he wouldn't contest the divorce but was disappointed that I was throwing away our marriage over something so petty. He needed to collect the last of his things, so I reluctantly let him in. He packed in silence, and then he sat on the couch, opposite me, and launched into a performance worthy of an Oscar. He wasn't contesting the divorce, he said, but he needed me to know I was making a terrible mistake. He had only ever loved me. He was insulted that I could even conceive of him cheating on me, especially with Fiona. He told me they were staying with his parents and that his mother had wanted to come and speak to me herself, but he, in his infinite grace, had stopped her because he respected my choice and didn't want me to feel cornered. That's rich, I said, unable to stop myself. I reminded him of the barrage of texts from his friends and family, a clear attempt to back me into a corner. He had the decency to look uncomfortable, denying his involvement, but I pulled up the messages, the evidence of his coordinated attack. Seeing no escape, he pivoted, his eyes welling up with crocodile tears. The last few weeks had been torture, he wept. Life without me was unimaginable. He wished there was anything he could do to make it right. It was a pathetic, transparent performance. And in that moment, an idea, cold and sharp, formed in my mind. You want to fix this? I asked, my voice flat. Promise me you will never see or speak to Fiona again. Cut her out of your life, completely and forever, and I will reconsider the divorce. The effect was instantaneous. The tears stopped. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. I had no intention of taking him back, regardless of his answer. This was not a negotiation, it was a test. A final, definitive confirmation of what I already knew. And he failed, spectacularly. He didn't even have to say the words. His face, his immediate defensive posture, said it all. But he said them anyway. It was unfair, he sputtered. She was his oldest friend, his sister. He couldn't just abandon her, not now when she was so vulnerable. It would be cruel. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. It was cruel to abandon his platonic sister, but perfectly acceptable to abandon his wife. I held up a hand, stopping his litany of excuses. And that's it, I said. That's the reason. Right there. You were just given a choice, your marriage or your friendship. And you chose her. You've always chosen her. So don't you dare tell me I'm overreacting. He had no answer. He left, the silence of his departure a final admission of his guilt. Our first court appearance was a formality, the beginning of a mandatory 6-month waiting period. Afterwards, he approached me, still clinging to the delusional hope that he could win me back. I asked him one simple question. Are you still living with Fiona? He couldn't answer, which was an answer in itself. He launched into a rambling justification about how Fiona's own mother was blaming her for the divorce, making it impossible for her to live at home. I felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a weary resignation. It was always someone else's fault, always a reason for Fiona to be centered in his life. I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing alone in the courthouse parking lot. His stubborn refusal to see the truth was staggering. He had sacrificed his marriage on the altar of his friendship with this woman, and he still couldn't admit it was a mistake. The final, shocking twist came a few days later. He showed up at my house unannounced, in a state of utter turmoil. He burst through the door, his face streaked with tears, and collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. This time, the tears were real. The grief was genuine. I found myself comforting him, a strange, reflexive act of humanity. When he could finally speak, the story came tumbling out. He had been at his parents' house, depressed about the divorce, when Fiona had come into his room. She had tried to comfort him, her comfort quickly escalating from platonic to predatory. She had tried to flirt, to cuddle, to initiate something more. He had pushed her away, horrified, and in that moment, the carefully constructed facade of their sibling relationship had crumbled. He finally saw her for what she was. A huge fight had erupted. She had accused him of leading her on for years, of using her, only to discard her for me. She'd called him a cheater, packed her bags, and stormed out. And now he was here, on my couch, broken and contrite, finally admitting that I had been right all along. He apologized, profusely and sincerely. He was sorry for taking me for granted, for not listening, for being so blind. He saw now that he didn't deserve me. We talked for hours that night, clearing the toxic air that had poisoned our marriage for so long. I finally believed him when he said he had only ever loved me, that he truly had seen Fiona as a sister. His blindness wasn't malicious, but it was destructive all the same. His apology, his validation, was a balm on a wound I didn't even realize was still so raw. It wasn't enough to make me go back. The trust had been too profoundly broken. But it was enough to change the ending of our story. We are still getting divorced, but the bitterness is gone, replaced by a quiet, sad understanding. We will end things on good terms, as two people who loved each other but were torn apart by a lie one of them refused to see.